listening to this, we have an astronaut, a robotic inventor, and a conservationist all on this panel that's coming up.
We absolutely do. You've nailed it. Are you coming for my job?
No. I think that's going to be pretty difficult because you were just named one of Australia's 100 most influential women. Congratulations for that.
Thank you very much.
I see that they're calling you to places. Let's now go back on stage to meet our keynote panelists.
I come from a long line of ocean advocates, explorers, and storytellers. Despite growing climate and environmental crises, I believe today's ocean narrative can be reshaped. From now through the next decade, we can create catalytic changes that allow us to regenerate, rebuild, and restore the lost abundance of our oceans, so that by 2050, our children have the same abundance that my grandfather once knew. This is my mission.
I noticed a lack of women in my engineering classes at university. This was confirmed by my professor's concern of the lack of women in the field. So I set out to change the world by recruiting my friends, and in a few months, we had taught 124 young Australian girls how to build robots. 15 years later, RoboGirls now teaches over 150,000 young women in 12 countries to be makers, and we are using technology to amplify our impact all over the world. Through writing, speaking, leading, and building, I am on a mission to inspire others and change the world.
Floating in the airlock before my very first spacewalk, I faced kind of a ridiculous dilemma. How best to get from inside out there? The hatch is small and circular, but with all of the tools strapped to the chest of my spacesuit and the huge oxygen pack on my back, I was square. Square astronaut and round hole. It's sort of a metaphor for my entire life, really. Trying to figure out how to get where I want to go when just getting out the door seems impossible. And today, my mission hasn't changed much. Do the things that are harder. Write and teach about ideas that can help. And I'm here to help create new ways to solve the old problems and to give humanity and life on Earth new opportunities.
Can you join me in welcoming explorer and ocean advocate Alexandra Cousteau, technology entrepreneur Marita Chang, and astronaut Chris Hadfield to the panel. What an inspiring way to kick off our morning together. Three incredibly audacious, bold visions for the change that you want to see in the world. And I think something that will resonate with the Lions and Leos in the room is that audacity of vision. This is an organisation that is very familiar with that. I want to start by talking about the barriers you have to overcome to bring that vision to life. Alex, I might come to you first. When you think about your vision for conservation and what you want to see, what are the challenges to making that real?
You know, when my grandfather first invented scuba diving in the 1950s and went on to make his films about the underwater world, we had a full, abundant, diverse, and resilient ocean for him to explore and make his films about. In the past 70 years since he started, we've lost half of the life in the oceans. Half of the fish and whales and creatures that lived there at that time are now gone. And so I think that one of the most important things we can do is reconsider our ambitions, from conserving what we have to rebuilding what we've lost. And that is a shift, a paradigm shift that is representative, of course, of so many aspects of our life. And we've lost something, we have to rebuild it, yet we haven't transferred that idea to our oceans.
I think that's such a powerful shift in paradigm, isn't it? Moving from that thinking of conserving what we once had to rebuilding and reigniting. Marita, how about for you with your vision?
Well, I'm very passionate about educating the next generation in robotics, engineering, computer science. I think that when you're wanting to work towards a really big goal, it's so important to bring people along with you. And if you're bringing all these people along with you, I think what's really important is to have all of them share in that common vision. So you're not telling them to gather wood, or you're not telling them to place that plank of wood here and nail there, and you're not telling them exactly what to do. But if you have that shared vision of longing to the horizon on the oceans, then people come along for the journey and they do whatever it takes in order to build that shared vision.
It's almost this piece around the mission getting momentum without you, that idea that many people can carry it on and move it forward. Chris, how about for you with space?
I was that little boy in that picture that they just showed, and 2,500 years ago, Sun Tzu said that strategy without tactics is just the slowest way to victory, but tactics without strategy is the noise you make before defeat. To me, I've always thought it's super important to have strategy and tactics, meaning to have a goal and to have some sort of path of personal change to get yourself in a position to be able to accomplish that goal. To turn myself from a little kid living on a farm with a head full of dreams but no path, to recognize the thing you have the greatest control over is yourself. And if you really want to change the world and accomplish those goals, the thing that you have to change the most is yourself. So I've taken those 2,500-year-old words to heart, trying to accomplish the things that are important to me.
Speaking of something that changed in yourself, Chris, you shared with me that there was a moment this is quite extraordinary, and I'm going to read it so I get the number right. You have orbited the Earth 2,650 times. And you said to me that there was something that happened on your third 6-month-long flight where you had an interaction from space that changed something for you. It fundamentally changed your perspective. Can you take us to that moment? What changed?
On my first 2 space flights, we didn't have the World Wide Web. We didn't have the internet. And so if I took a beautiful picture on board the spaceship, it was on film. And it might be years before I could come to Melbourne and show it to anybody. But on our third space flight, we had digital photography and we had access to social media. And so I could look out the window, take a picture, and then immediately send it. And after a few weeks of that, I thought, why don't I ask people, what do they want to see? So I sent a note to the world on social media. What do you want me to take a picture of? And the joy of it was that the most common answer that came back was, I want a picture of my hometown. And at first I thought that was just kind of cute. But then I realized 2 things. Number 1, people are proud of where they're from. They try and make it beautiful. And number 2, they want to see where they fit in with everybody else. And for me, that was immensely unifying. To hear that same common voice from all around the world, it really reinforced to me what it is we're all hoping for. Some joy and some laughter, a life fully lived, and a better world, if possible, of hope and opportunity for our children. It really brought home to me the commonality of the human existence.
It's wonderful. What a beautiful message there. I can imagine it would have kept you a very busy photographer for the International Space Station as well. Alexandra, you said something moments ago that we need to reset our ambition, moving away from this idea of conserving what we've lost already too much of, and actually resetting our ambition on rebuilding. Can you talk to us about how do we go about doing that? How do we reset the vision and be bolder in our thinking?
Well, we've talked about vision. I think in terms of especially the environment and the oceans, I always say without a vision of where to go, if we want to get to a better place, we need a vision of where to go. And without that vision, we keep reacting our way into the future. And that's what we've been doing with how we've managed our ocean and also our land, our entire planet. When my grandfather was asked how he was able to do everything that he did, he responded that it was because he lived in his lucky moment in time. And what he meant by that was that after World War II, everything that he needed to be able to do what he did was there, or almost there. So he invented, he innovated on a piece of equipment that was meant to be a car part and turned it into a regulator and created scuba. He knew that people had gone from black and white newspapers to color TV, and everybody really had a TV, but there was no content. So he innovated on this very specific set of circumstances and was able to do what he did, which was to help the world fall in love with what was under the surface of the ocean that they had been unfamiliar with up until that time. And he was able to do that for three reasons. One, there was a global audience waiting to see what was under the surface, 70% of our planet. Number two, the tools were there, the technology was there, but it hadn't been used. It hadn't been made into something that was fit for his purpose, and he knew how to do that. Number three, he was able to tell stories that made people feel like they could write themselves into the story. They wanted to be part of that. They wanted to be a member of the crew of the Calypso. Today, I think we also have a lucky moment in time. We have global multitudes that are concerned about the climate, that want to rebuild our home. We have new technologies like AI and big data and digital platforms that have transformed our ability to take action. If you think about it, if you take your phone out of your pocket and you tap the glass 8 times in the right place, you can make change happen in the real world. This is something that my grandfather could only have dreamed of doing. And so that gives us the ability to take action in ways that we never could have before.
I think that's such a wonderful point, that piece too, around the lesson you've taken from your grandfather, around the impetus to make sure you continue to adapt according to the circumstances of the time. You know, the availability that colour TV gave him to tell stories in a different way, and the importance of thinking how we continue to adapt our change making and our storytelling in order to make sure we're reaching hearts and minds where they are able to be met and reached at this moment in time. Marita, it strikes me that something Alex just touched on there might resonate with what I'm keen to ask you about, which is this idea of followership. Because I think it's been so core to how you built RoboGals so successfully, inspiring people to follow the movement, something anyone who works in a volunteer organisation has a core component of what we must do. She's mentioned the idea of making people fall in love with it. But what would you say you've learned in your journey so far around what it takes to inspire people to follow what you've started?
Yeah, so I think all of us here work with a lot of volunteers, and I think what I've learned from that experience is to just demonstrate grace. I work with a lot of university student volunteers, and they've got a lot of commitments. They've got university, they've got their cause that they're passionate about, they've got their part-time jobs, and they're just stretching in all different directions. And so I try to give them a lot of grace. I try and take people at their word. So some people try and read behind what people are saying or like extrapolate different meaning into things, but I very much just take people at their word. And because I'm so straight with them, they're straight with me, and they tell me what it's like for them and what they need from me. And sometimes they might need to take a 2 or 3 week break in order to do their exams or do their assignments. And I recognize that they're just volunteering with me. It's not their #1 priority. I'm not going to make them wrong that they need to focus on their university studies. And because I give them that grace, they respond with so much love and generosity for their time after they've taken the time that they need to focus on their university exams and assignments. And so I think, that's applicable not just to uni students, but people in all walks of life. You know, everyone is busy with so many commitments. Give people grace. And I think following on from that, it's also really important to just see the good in people and think of people as goodish. I mean, we all try our best, we're always trying to do the right thing, but sometimes we say the wrong thing, or sometimes we say something, it gets misinterpreted, and I think rather than holding that against that person, I know that when I say something and I say the wrong thing, I'm mortified with myself, and I think, please forgive me, please don't hold that against me. I don't want that to be how you see me. I'm going to try and do better in the future, and I think we should all try and forgive people more, and extend that grace to people.
That feels so prescient for this moment in time in particular. I really appreciate that encouragement to think more about grace in leadership. Alexandra, if I can come back to you for a moment on storytelling. I think that is such an important and powerful idea. And you've already given us a couple of tools that are useful to think about in our storytelling toolkit. Being very thoughtful about the mediums that we're using, making people fall in love with the story, making them long to be a part of it. What else would you say makes for a really compelling story that naturally, allows people to feel that sense of, oh my gosh, I want to be involved in that? Any other tips?
Well, one of the things that I've learned as I did my expeditions around the world looking at these issues is that there are things that we all have in common. One of the ones that ended up making us smile when we were looking at water issues in different countries around the world was that no matter who I was interviewing, people who were vastly different on the spectrum of the human person would always say to me over the course of the interview, water is life. And we all know that. We know it instinctively, we know it intellectually, but to have it expressed to me by all these people in the exact same way reinforced this idea that we have so much more in common than what separates us. And if we're able to tell stories that touch on our shared humanity and our shared aspirations for ourselves and our children and the places that we call home, and our hopes and dreams for the future, if we're able to tell our story through that lens, it becomes something that everybody can relate to. And it ends up creating a narrative that people can write themselves into. They can see themselves in that story. And that's always been really important to me.
And that so beautifully overlaps, Chris, with what you were saying earlier about that moment in space, realising the shared humanity of everyone wanting to see their hometown in a picture. But I want to bring you to something else that you're a big believer in, and it was quite a pivotal moment in your own career, around the moment where you realised the power of your choice and your specific choice around what to do next. Can you take us to that moment and why that's so significant for you?
I'm very much the child of stories. I grew up reading voraciously, reading fiction and science fiction, and watching Star Trek on television, and 2001: A Space Odyssey, all of these fantastic ideas in my head. But I didn't see any link between the dreams and the fantasies. I was growing up on a farm where my nearest neighbor was a long bike ride away, until when I was just turning 10, a guy named Mike took a picture from the moon just after he'd gotten Neil and Buzz ready to separate and go down and land. And it was a picture of the far side of the moon, and as they came around the curve of the moon, the Earth popped into view. And suddenly it struck home to me that this was a thing that people were actually doing. This was no longer just fantasy or fiction or entertainment or books. This is an actual possibility. That link was super important for me, to see other people doing those things. I was an enormous fan of your grandfather, of what Jacques Cousteau was showing, revealing us part of the world that had been hidden. And to be it, you've got to see it. You need to see other people that are sort of like you doing that sort of thing, because it then gives you permission to make that super important transition from just fantasy and armchair to actually making the changes within yourself so that you can maybe be part of the overall change itself.
I love that piece around, in order to be it, you've got to see it. And Marita, it links to me something I was keen to ask you about, which is this piece around whenever we're talking about change making, we're sort of touching on the next generation in some degree. We're trying to leave the world better for them. We're trying to engage them in order that there is the sustained effort that can produce long-lasting change. Role modelling was something Chris touched on there, and it's something you embody so beautifully in the work that you're doing. But I think a real topic of interest for the lions in the room is how do we get more Leos? How do we get more of that next generation coming in? Is there anything else that you'd say that you've learned around what it takes, not just to engage them, but to motivate them to get involved and contribute?
I really encourage people to follow their passion, and I think one way to do that is to tell them to fall in love with the unglamorous work that it takes to achieve these amazing goals. And so, I think it's really easy to look at the really fancy photo or people smiling and think, yes, that's what I want to do, that's the goal. But that is not every day. From all your volunteering efforts, I'm sure you have so many of those photos, that is not every day. Every day is just showing up every day, doing the work consistently, putting in the hours, not getting any recognition, not having people pat you on the back, not people telling you, people not even telling you that you're doing a good job, people ridiculing you, people telling you that you're crazy. And so, when I think back, I worked on my organization for 3.5 years, and in that third year, I was invited to speak at one organization, one mechanical engineering society. They said, we want to hear about what you're doing, come and give a talk. So I did that. And then 6 months after that, I was named the Young Australian of the Year, and I got this award by the Prime Minister of Australia. And after that happened, I got 400 invites to give speeches, and everyone wanted to know about me and what I was doing. But, and that was great, I got to share my story. But I loved those 3.5 years of obscurity, of me just in my room, just doing the work that needs to be done, just fighting the fight, even though other people didn't believe in what I was doing. And so I think that we should tell young people to love the unglamorous work that you'll be doing 99.9% of the time, that will lead to the result. But that result is only a very small fraction of that whole journey. And you can't just live for that high. You need to love the everyday, because that is life.
I love that challenge to get people to fall in love with the unglamorous work. I'm watching everyone on the panel nod, Marita, as you're saying that. And I might stay with you for just a moment. I've been very fortunate to know Marita for well over a decade, to have followed this incredible and deserving meteoric rise that she's been on. But I'm interested, Marita, for someone who has achieved so much so young, and I watched achieve so much so young, you actually give a lot more credit to your failures than your successes. So can you speaking of, can you talk to us about the role failures play?
Yeah, failure is my friend. I used to think that if you failed, I didn't know what happened to those people. I thought they just vanished off the face of the earth. And then I started failing, and I'm well, I'm still here. So I was in London, and it started my organisation in Melbourne, and I thought, I'm in London to study at Imperial College, studying mechanical engineering. I want to start my organisation in the UK, we can be global. And I emailed everyone at the university and said, come to our meeting. No one showed up to the first meeting. I realized it's after half an hour, so I cried. And I thought, maybe I'm in a busy cafeteria, no one can see me. I'm gonna set another meeting for the next day in the room across from the cafeteria. Then there'll be no one there. I'll definitely see people if they come to my meeting. The next day, I'm in that room, and after 15 minutes, I realized no one's showing up again. I cry again, but a little less because I'm growing resilient. And then I thought, I've got another 6 months here in the UK. I've got another 6 months of trying. I'm not going to give up on this. Even after I came back to Australia. And
such an important redefinition of failure there. I completely agree. And I'm very grateful that you were so persistent in that moment. Yeah, absolutely. Can create the false impression that people who lead change in any way, shape or form, making change, have sort of a predisposition for intestinal fortitude beyond the average person. They've got guts, they've got courage, but you're a really big believer in the importance of being able to work through fear. Can you take us to a particular moment in space where you took a risk, or you felt that fear and how you handled it?
The most dangerous thing I've ever done is fly rocket ships. I've flown 3 different rocket ships to space. The odds of dying on my first space shuttle flight were 1 in 38. But the real question in life is, what are you willing to take a risk for? And how do you manage your fear? Where you draw the lines on your balance between risk and fear will determine the edges of your life. And the greatest antidote for fear is competence. And when I decided at 9 years old that I'm going to turn myself into an astronaut, that got me over the first part. Okay, I know what I'm going to risk. And then the rest of my time up until launch was changing who I was, improving my competence so that I had a lot more going for me than just fear and adrenaline in my veins. And no matter what you do in life, everything worth doing has risk. And how you address the risk and how you don't just cross your fingers but change who you are, that will determine the bounds and the accomplishments of your own life.
I love it. Everything worth doing has risk involved. Please, applaud, absolutely. And what a great question to take away and reflect on. What are you willing to take a risk for and put it on the line for? Alex, if I can come to you, you're of the opinion with the way that we tell stories at the moment, we are brilliantly negative, which I think is such an interesting mirror moment to hold up to ourselves and go, wow, there's a lot of negativity. You scroll through social media, you look on the news, it's easy to think we're not capable of doing much. How do we flip the script and overcome that challenge?
This is the most important thing that we can do with relation to our oceans, I think, in life in general. And our chief scientist, who is the best, in my opinion, the most published marine ecologist in the world, often says that the worst thing we can do for our oceans is to lose hope that we can rebuild them. And it's easy to be brilliantly negative. It's so difficult to be brilliantly positive. And for me, I think that when we look at what people have been able to do in their own communities to rebuild oceans, we see so many stories of success, failure as well, and we need to learn from them. I think we also need to focus on our successes. What can we learn from them? Who can be our role model? How do we share knowledge and information, and how do we build? When you look at the news stories, it's so negative. Right? If it bleeds, it leads. And so everything that we read about climate, about the oceans, about the ice caps is negative. It's scary, and it seeps in and makes us feel hopeless. When I was a little girl learning to ski in the French Alps, I had a teacher who would take me up to the top of the bunny slope and point me in the right direction, and he'd say, Alexandra, now, just remember, when you're going down the slope, don't look at the trees. If you look at the trees, you're going to ski into them. Just look at mom, and you'll get there.
Good advice.
And it is good advice for, I think, everything, because if we focus, and it goes back to what I said earlier, to get to a better place, we need a vision of where to go, or we keep reacting our way to the future, or worse, we ski into the trees. And so for me, when we look at all of the negativity online and in social media and in journalism, for me that's taking us into the trees, and we end up debating where the trees are, how big the trees are, how long it's going to take to hit them, rather than sharing a vision of where we want to go and deciding how we're going to get there together. And if we're able to plot our way into a common vision of a better place, it's going to be a lot easier to get there.
I love it. Nita, please. To make sure we are not skiing into the trees. So there's a great reminder. Now, would you believe our time has flown? So I just get the opportunity to ask you one final question, which is, in everything we've talked about, if you were to encourage the Lions and Leos in the room to leave and go do one thing, just one quick idea for a question to ask, something to put into practice. Alexandra, I might start with you and work my way down. What would you encourage people to go and do after listening to this conversation?
Well, the ocean teaches us that we're all connected. So as you act locally, remember that everything you do has a ripple effect around the world. I think you're probably seeing that here today. and remember to have a vision of where we can go together, so we don't react our way into the future, but we get there as one.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Marita?
I think it's really important to just keep taking one step after the other, and that's easy to do when things are going well and you're feeling great, but it's also important to do that when you're not feeling great. And so after one of my projects, I was like so exhausted, I was so burnt out, but I knew that my project after that it would take a lot of time, it would take a lot of energy, it would take a huge community. And so even though I was burnt out, I thought, I'm not gonna try and get there like a rocket ship. I'm just gonna take my time. I'm gonna like let myself heal from my burnout, but I'm gonna make sure that I'm putting steps into the action every single day so the project can build while I recover. So yeah, just one step at a time, one step in front of the other, and we'll get there.
Wonderful. A great reminder too there that grace applies to the way that you treat yourself as much as it does to the way that you treat others. Chris, closing thought?
Every one of us in this room is at a different stage of life. And yet, we all have our future in front of us. And I think the thing that I want everybody to remember is you've got your goals and your dreams. You've got the things that you've done so far that have brought you to this moment in life. But the only thing that you really control is what you're going to do next. What are you going to do today? How are you going to change this amazing gathering through your actions to get you closer to your dreams? And your life is not what you set out to do. It is the strung together threads of each of the small decisions of what you chose to do next. So be super deliberate in that, because that will determine how much success and fun you have in Melbourne, but also all the things that you have a chance to still do in all the remaining stages of your life.
Wonderful. 3 incredibly inspiring but also pragmatic closing notes to finish on. Can you join me in giving a huge Lions thank you to our phenomenal panel, Alexandra Hadfield, engaging audience. Can you join with me in welcoming that international...
Aren't they amazing? Are you inspired? Have you thought about your next steps? And have you thought about how we need to be kind to ourselves and each other on the journeys that we take to achieve our goals? I'm sure that every one of us will go home enriched as we reflect upon the wisdom and the perspectives that you've shared with us today. Thank you so very much. And as a token of appreciation, we have for you a unique Lions International gift. Each year our association sponsors a peace contest, and hundreds of thousands of children around the world depict their vision of peace. And we'd like to present you with this year's peace poster plaques. Thank you so much, Holly, for being here with us. You did an amazing job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Chris, for your vision. Thank you. Marita, thank you for your words of wisdom as well. And Alexandra, thank you so much for sharing your perspectives and the opportunities before us. We'll all know not to look at the distractions. I won't say don't look at the trees, we're about the environment, but don't look at the distractions as we keep taking one step at a time to achieve our goals. Thank you so very much.